In this video, I'm going to show how to create conditional text in Google AppSheet by using a virtual column. So to show what I mean by that, I'm going to create a new record. I'm going to select a date and an item. And you see when I do that, it creates a new card with the date as the title and the item as the subtitle. If I do the same thing again and I only select an item, you see that the title shows up blank. What I want to do is be able to show some conditional text such as date not available in that case. So where I found this question is on Stack Overflow, and someone basically has a table very similar to what I just showed where they have some dates and then they have the name of the items. And this is the logic that they describe that they want right here. If the date exists, they want the title to say arriving on and then the date. If it doesn't exist, they just want it to say unknown so that something always actually appears in the title there. So if we scroll down a little bit, the answer that they've actually accepted uses Google Sheets to do this. It's actually adding some AppScript code within Google Sheets to create the dates. There's some cases that you might want to do that, and I'll talk about that a little bit after we show the solution in AppSheet here. But for simplicity, most of the time, you probably just want to go ahead and do this in AppSheet. And the answer down below that actually shows how you can use virtual columns and be able to do that. So let's take that bottom answer and apply it to the app that we have to see how this can work. What that answer suggested we do is to create a virtual column, and you can do that within the data section within AppSheet. So I'm right now in the reservations table. That's what's actually displaying all the rows that we were looking at earlier. So that's where I want to create my virtual column. And you click this plus in the upper right-hand corner here in order to add a virtual column. So you're going to put a name for it. In this case, we're going to call this column arrival date, and then you put in a formula. When you're writing a formula, it's often easiest if you just write down in plain English what you're trying to do before you actually go in and try to write the formula. So they did something similar to that here. They used what's called pseudocode, which is similar to plain English, to say if the date exists, they want the title to equal the text arriving on, including a space, plus the actual date that the person is arriving, and otherwise they just want the title to be unknown. And to create our formula, we just click here. If you haven't used this expression assistant before, there's a bunch of what they call examples with a bunch of different categories of all the different types of functions that are available. You can use that to try to identify exactly what you're trying to do. I find something that's much easier is to just use ChatGPT. Try to explain to it exactly what you're trying to do in plain English. Say that you're trying to write an AppSheet expression, and if you're able to give it a description of what your tables look like, it can even use your actual values, and that will usually give you something that's really close to the expression that you are actually looking for. But in our case, we're going to write it right here, and we're going to take that plain English description that we had and try to create a formula from it. So the first part of that was if, to say if the date is not blank. So that is in the other section here. I just know from previous experience. And there's a condition down here called if, and you say what it looks like is if, and it's got the condition to check is the first part of it. If that's true, it outputs whatever the value true here, and if it's false, it outputs whatever the value is here. So I'm going to insert that in as my main expression, and you see it put the text in order to be able to do that. So the first part I want to say is if the date is not blank. So I just again happen to know that function to check if it's blank is under yes, no. And you see it has one down here that says it is not blank. So I'm going to insert that in right there. And then it's saying if is not blank, and what I want to check in this particular case is the date. So if I delete where it said item and I put in an opening bracket, it's going to suggest the fields that are available in the particular table that I'm working with. So I want to select date. So now that's got the first part of it. If the date is not blank, then I want the next thing to be value 1. So if the date is not blank, I want value 1 to, or whatever's in this part of the expression, to equal whatever I want to show up in that case. So the next thing we want to do is join together the text arriving on plus the actual date. And there's a function that's under text in order to do that. It's kind of uses the computer programming word for doing this, which is called concatenate. But what concatenate does is it lets you join multiple pieces of text together into a single piece of text. And that's what we want to do here. We want to join the text arriving on with the actual date. So I'm going to click in that part of the expression, and I'm going to insert this concatenate function. I'm going to put some values in there. And what I want to do, so the first part of the text I want to be arriving on. So I'm just going to say here, arriving on, and then I want it to have a space. So I'm going to insert a space after that, and then I want to have the actual date. So I can hit a comma, and then it's the next value that comes after that. So again, if I hit the opening bracket, it will pop up the options in this table. I want to say date. Okay, so now it's saying if the date is not blank, it's going to say arriving on date, and otherwise I just want it to say unknown. So it needs to be in double quotes here, and I'm just going to say unknown. All right, that's our expression now. So I'm going ahead and click save, and it will create my new virtual column using that formula. All right, so let's save our changes here, and let's go ahead and try to create a new record. Before I do this, I will say that this is not going to work immediately, and I will show you why it doesn't work in 1 second. So we're going to go ahead and create one. We'll put in a date. We'll select a category. We'll click save, and you see it still does not say arriving on like we want it to. And I'm going to create another example record without a date, and click save. Okay, so we have our two records there. And again, it's not currently showing the title that we want. So the next thing we need to do is actually go into the view and change it to use our virtual column instead of the date, which it's currently using. The date still has the actual like raw value in it that we're saving here. But what the virtual column is doing is it's actually taking those raw values, applying that logic that we added to them, and returning a new value. So we just need to update our view to use that new value. So in order to do that, you go into the views menu over here, and I'm in my reservations table. Down at the bottom here, I have my title and my subtitle. So my title is currently, as I just mentioned, going to the date. I just want to check that to use our new arrival date virtual column. And you see immediately that updated in order to show arriving on in the date and unknown for when we hadn't specified a date. So just what we wanted. All right, now let's talk about that first answer in the Stack Overflow question where they were creating the date directly in the Google Sheet using AppScript and when you might want to do something like that. This is the actual Google Sheet that my AppSheet app is connected to. And you see for the two records that I created, only the first one has a date. It still remains blank in the actual data for the second one. So again, in AppSheet, we see arriving on in the date and unknown. And if we look at the sheet itself, it only has the dates. And that's because everything that's in AppSheet is truly a virtual column. It's not a real thing. It's basically just like looking at the data and creating that value based on the expression versus any data that actually exists. If you actually need the data in your sheet, for example, maybe you have another sheet that's using values from this sheet in order to run different expressions and formulas within Google Sheets itself instead of AppSheet, you might want to, in that case, actually go with that first answer and create the data within Google Sheets. Because, again, it's not actually going to be there as real data if you're just using a virtual column within AppSheet. But if you are just doing something similar to this example where you just want to show different text based on what's available, it's much simpler and kind of like more straightforward and more compatible if you switch to another data source in the future if you just do everything in AppSheet. So that's how you can add text conditionally using virtual columns. If there's other ways you're doing it, I would love to hear about them. Please add them in the comments below. And if you'd like more tips on using AppSheet and other business productivity tools, please subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching.